So tonight, I am pleased to welcome Michael Wolff back to Politics and Prose for the release of All or Nothing, How Trump Recaptured America, one of the first books to chronicle the 2024 election and what Wolff calls one of the most remarkable comebacks in American political history. Publishers Weekly has called the book a penetrating diagnosis of the president's character and managerial style, and the New York Times has called the book undeniably gripping. Michael Wolff, who The Guardian has called the president's least favorite biographer, is the author of 11 previous books, and this is his fourth book about Donald Trump's political journey. For more than a decade, Wolff was a regular columnist for New York Magazine and Vanity Fair, and is the winner of 2 National Magazine Awards. Wolff will be in conversation with Alexander Nazaryan, who writes about science, politics, and culture for the New York Times and other publications. He was previously a national correspondent for Newsweek and a White House correspondent for Yahoo News. He's the author of The Best People, a book about the first Trump cabinet. Please help me welcome Michael Wolff and Alexander Nazaryan.
I can't tell if this is this on. Jeez. Well, yeah. Hi. Thank you so much for coming. Now, my pleasure to introduce Michael Wolff. Michael started as a copy boy at the Times, as many great journalists have, and which used to be the way you started, as fetching things.
Many not so great, too.
Yes. He was a columnist for New York Magazine and Vanity Fair. He's founder of Newser, a news site. He wrote a book about Rupert Murdoch, the man who owns the news, and then he's, I think, rightly famous for his trilogy about the Trump years, Fire and Fury, Siege, and Landslide, and I guess that's now actually a tetralogy. And actually, I'd like to read from a review of his latest book. Maybe you'll recognize the voice. It's a reader. Anyway, so-called author Michael Wolff's new book is a total fake job, just like the other junk he wrote. He called me many times trying to set up a meeting, but I never called him back because I didn't want to give him the credibility of an interview. Others in the administration were also called. They reported his calls and likewise did not talk to him. There's actually punctuation here. I assume, however, he was able to speak to a small number of people, but not meaningfully. His other books about me have been discredited, as this one will be also. I am one who believes in commenting about fake news or made-up stories, even if you have to punch low, and shouldn't be wasting the time required to do so. We had one of the greatest elections in history, those are capitalized, and perhaps the greatest first month ever, according to almost everybody. But Wolff doesn't want to talk about that. Yeah, Michael, what?
Well, I'll just say that when he as soon as he posted this, someone in the White House sent me the link and said, "You're welcome!" exclamation point.
Not done yet. This whole thing, we're just going to read Trump's Truth Socials. He mentions the people that surrounded me during the election, and in many cases now, in derogatory terms, but they couldn't have been that bad, because here I am in the White House refusing to take his calls. Wolff says he has sources, but he doesn't have them. It's a lie, as is the case with many so-called journalists. If he has sources, let them be revealed. Watch, it will never happen. He is fake news, a total loser, and no one should waste their time or money in buying this boring and obviously fictitious book. Do you think he's ever read a book start to finish?
Well, in the first interview I did with him, and I actually have known Trump for years because in New York, and I was at New York Magazine, and he would always be calling to to complain about something that was said about him, but more likely to complain when nothing was said about him. What was the question?
You think he's ever read a
yes,
book?
yes. So I did this interview with him in 2016 when he was when it was still like this, this guy's not going to be president. There's just no way. But I did an interview with him, and I asked him the question that is asked of all presidents at some point: what's your favorite book? And then the answer is always the Bible. But I asked him, and he had this look on his face like, oh, yeah, you got me. But then somehow reaching back, I don't know what, he said, and his eyes brightened, he said, All Quiet on the Western Front. So I figure maybe he, in high school, he read a book.
Okay, that's a scoop, actually. Let's turn to something serious. It has been, the first month has sort of moved at a torrid pace. Were you surprised by kind of their execution of, well, the plan that they had in Project 2025 and America First?
Well, I'm always surprised by Trump, actually, which is why apparently I keep writing books about him. But I think that there's a certain logic and certain. This is the Donald Trump I know because the Donald Trump that I've written about is really interested in one thing, which is just headlines, headlines, headlines. If he is not the center of the news cycle, and the people around him talk about this rather, with their own level of concern and curiosity. But if he's not in the news cycle, if he's not dominating it, he kind of deflates, he gets depressed. So this is what he has to do. So it's really not about governing. This is not about policy, ultimately about policy. This is about headlines. It's about the attention, about him at the center of attention. And as we've seen, whatever he says, whatever headline he gets today, he'll reverse tomorrow. Yes, tariffs, and everybody goes crazy. Oh yeah, well, no tariffs today, maybe tomorrow.
You write about the fact that he considers billionaires almost as they have a moral worth that's much greater than the rest of us. Musk is obviously a billionaire, so I imagine there is some genuine respect, and I think there is. I really do. But can they sustain this relationship?
No, well, as I point out to not only to everybody who asks, but everybody who calls me who goes to work for Donald Trump, it always, 100% of the time, it ends badly. No one survives this relationship. Not a single solitary person. Everybody is humiliated, disgraced, fired, indicted, and to a man.
So it's going to end badly.
Oh yes.
What's the mood in the White House right now?
Well, the mood it's always the mood around him, and it's always about his mood, and everybody else reacts to that, reflects that, reacts to that, and so now there's a feeling he's in a manic mood now. And that really goes, and I think you can see him. He really goes between mania and his form of depression, and it's a manic moment, and everybody is kind of running behind him. Everybody is trying to, as always, say what he wants to say, do what he wants to do, stay in the flow of his mood.
At this point in 2017, I would say, tell me if you disagree, Steve Bannon was the most influential person in the White House, in part because he was leaking, he was creating the narrative with all his leaks. Who is influential right now other than Elon?
Well, I think Elon is playing the Steve role now, and they both got the Time magazine cover, who's the real president, co-presidents, and they are kind of the official disruptor, and that was obviously Steve was in the in the first 6 months of the first administration, and they are the idea people. And Steve, of course, lasted for 6 months, which I think is a fairly good measure of what will happen to Elon.
Steve, of course, is doing his War Room podcast now, which is for MAGA is a necessary stop if you have any sort of agenda or product to promote. Does he have influence, in the administration? Does he have pull?
No, he doesn't have influence with Trump directly. Trump doesn't like him. Trump really does not. I mean, they have not really fixed that, whatever that breach was. Actually, that breach was partly me. But that has not really been fixed. I actually only know of one occasion where they were actually together since he fired Steve in 2000 August 2017. But Steve does have a lot of juice with that certain MAGA crowd, and Steve knows a lot, continues to have relationships with the people around Trump and calling them up, and when Steve calls you in one of his fits of I'm going to do everything to you, I'm going to pull your fingernails out and your fingers out, and you're destroyed, and that does have some impact.
He's a charmer.
He is charming, actually.
I know. I'm joking, but also not.
Yeah. Some of the best Trump times I've spent. That's to make a distinction between all other times in my life. But some of the best Trump times have been with Steve.
Let's talk about the White House briefing room. I spent about a year there. It's a tough place to report from, and I think this administration is making it even tougher by sort of, altering the rules of the press pool to make the pool more friendly to sort of, open to right-wing outlets. What do you think the White House Correspondents Association can and should do in response to their strong argument?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask. First, I've never quite understood what the White House Correspondents Association does in any sense. And I often feel that way about White House correspondents. And I have no idea why anyone is actually sitting in that press room, and what the value of that, I can't begin to imagine.
It is, of the beats I've had, it was the combination of difficult and unpleasant was uncanny. And, but look, the truth is the White House Association does take itself very seriously. I was never part of it, but it does. And they believe they need to formulate a battle plan against Carolyn, leave it, the press secretary?
Carolyn.
Carolyn.
Yeah.
And they just haven't been able to.
But she's like that. Even that's a misunderstanding. She's just the pretty face there. She doesn't have any authority and any power.
Who's driving that kind of anti-media push?
Well, the communications director is this guy Stephen Chung, who would otherwise be the White House, be the press secretary. I mean, he does have real authority, but he weighs 400 pounds, and so Trump is like, hide him.
Right. He's a true loyalist. I mean, I've been talking to Steve now for years. He has never gone out of favor with Trump, right? He's one of the few.
Well, he's slowly risen up. I mean, as other people have been disgraced, humiliated, and indicted, then he's slowly risen up, basically on the basis of his that he'll release. His statements please Trump, so he called me, I was a lying sack of shit, which he's actually used. I think he called Bob Woodward that too. So there's a lot of boilerplate.
How do you see media coverage of this administration relative to coverage of the first Trump administration?
Well, I think the media is completely freaked out. I mean, I think every media organization which has regulatory and licensing issues is terrified, is groveling, is capitulating. I think so. That means every broadcast news organization has a plan not to antagonize Donald Trump. Now, that's a terrible position to be put in for a news organization. I mean, I think it's I don't really know how you can function, and but that's what's going on in every organization with regulatory and licensing issues. So, in a way, I guess it's a good time to be in print. And those are words I never thought I would be saying again.
But what about what's happening with the Washington Post and the changes that Jeff is making that seem to be...
Well, again, regulatory issues.
Right.
Bezos has regulatory issues. And so, it's not a coincidence that he's paid Melania Trump $40 million to have a documentary made about herself.
Do you see any outlets or any prominent reporters who are doing that dogged work that all journalists should be doing and holding this administration to account, but also telling us things we don't yet know about this administration?
Well, I think the Times is doing a very solid, and very good job. I mean, I think that whatever their position on Trump, it has not been, they have not been intimidated, and they are not being held to a corporate account which has other interests. Curiously, the Wall Street Journal is doing a great job. Yep. So I mean, which goes into then this other relationship. Rupert Murdoch hates Donald Trump, but then feels compelled to bend a knee to Donald Trump because he's the president, but then gets incensed anyway because Donald Trump is, as Rupert has often observed, a fucking idiot.
And Rupert, correct me if I'm wrong, wanted DeSantis, at least at first.
Well, he wanted anybody but Donald Trump. I mean, after the election and then after January 6th, Rupert really made it his kind of last mission in life, to prevent Donald Trump from ever any possibility that he would come back into public life. Now, that turns out to have been an enormous failure, but...
What's odd, though, is that Rupert's viewers on Fox News are Trump loyalists. So in that sense, he's counter to his own audience, isn't he?
Well, he was counter to his own audience. I mean, after January 6th, the plan at Fox was very clear. Give Ron DeSantis all of the airtime that he might want and that he needs, and keep Donald Trump off the air. And it was a kind of a test. I mean, who needed who more? Did Donald Trump need Fox more, or did Fox need Donald Trump more? And obviously, the latter proved to be the truer.
And is that partly because we have this new right-wing media that has nothing to do with Fox? Yeah,
maybe. I think Donald Trump knows how to play every every media. It doesn't really matter. And he also realizes that it's not really about good press or bad press. It's about dominating the press. It's about, if press is zero sum. If Donald Trump is dominating the headlines, nobody else is getting headlines.
But that doesn't work for most people. Most politicians, the longer scrutiny is applied to them, the more readily they wither. Why doesn't that work on Trump?
Because he changes the headlines every day. Because he's faster, more vivid, more in his own way electrifying than everybody else. And I think he just gives that idea that one person owns the media, and one person owns the media because he is doing things that are stranger and weirder and things that have never been done before is the way you make everybody else irrelevant.
So, for example, the meeting with Zelensky.
And all of those things, Donald Trump has theoretically, in so many ways, been held to account. But being held to account doesn't do anything, because in a way it just becomes another way to get headlines. So he can be indicted. He's been held to account more than anyone else, I think, in our political lives. He was indicted 4 criminal indictments, and instead of that bringing him down, that actually gave him the central issue of his campaign.
And you talk about you write very well, and I'll say what I really enjoyed about this book was the way it melded the shit show that was the campaign with the shit show that was the legal strategy, such as there was one. And you see the way the one becomes the other, particularly at Center Street, the courthouse in Manhattan, where MAGA starts showing up to the trial as if it were like a political event, and it becomes the kind of circus that Trump thrives on. And from then we're sort of in the campaign, and the trials, sort of go away as the campaign accelerates. Do you think the Democrats understand Trump or Trump 2.0 and how to defang him?
No, clearly not. I don't. I think that this is from as soon as this began in 2015, Democrats were confused by it, failed to recognize it, or failed to recognize its power, and then have ever since tried to force this into a context that just doesn't explain it, that doesn't fit. So I think that's fundamentally that Donald Trump must be a politician like other politicians, because Donald Trump must be a politician like other politicians because he's a politician. Therefore, it must be about cause and effect, which is what politics is about. And it must be about his method to accomplish the things that he wants to accomplish, and that's what he has to be. The Democrats have to block that or get in the way of that. When that is not what Donald Trump is about at all. Donald Trump is about attention. And when I interviewed him in 2016, before still there was no logic that could make him president, and I said, okay, why are you doing this? And he said, and there was no equivocation there, no doubt. He just was seamless. He said, to be the most famous man in the world. And I think that's a kind of motivation that Democrats, who are traditional, all of them who come out of a traditional political background, don't understand that this is about something that ultimately has nothing to do with politics.
You talk a lot to big ticket Democratic donors. What are you hearing from them right now?
I think that it's a combination of being resigned, embarrassed, and waiting for somebody to have an idea, and nobody has an idea.
Are you seeing a leader emerge, the post-Biden, post-Harris leader of the party emerge?
No, not at all. Are you?
No.
I mean,
do you think Harris is the leader of the party?
who?
No.
I think that was I think everybody, that's part of the embarrassment here. That was a bad idea. I mean, she was a bad candidate. There should have been some other open contest. It didn't work. And then everybody fooled themselves. There was that month of August in which she was, she went from the person nobody could stand, nobody had a kind word about in years, to suddenly the savior.
Do you think, it seems to me like at some point, and maybe we're just waiting for the books that are going to do this, there's going to be a reckoning with kind of Biden and his refusal to step down until it was too late to really have a primary, and the many decisions that people believe Harris made that doomed her campaign, whether it was picking walls, not going on Rogan. But I feel like that autopsy hasn't happened yet.
Well, no, it hasn't, and I think it will happen, but I think it will miss the point. And because that'll be an autopsy about what we did that was politically wrong, and that, and it doesn't come to terms with who Donald Trump is and what Donald Trump means, and what that says about not only about the country, but how politics itself has changed.
The only Democrat I see who understands media in the way that I think Trump does is Gavin Newsom, which I'm not saying that in relation to his policy, just on the media plane. Do you?
The hair.
The hair. Absolutely. And he has a new podcast, and the first guest was Charlie Kirk, the sort of right-wing entrepreneur. It's a very unusual first guest, unless you're thinking of it in a Trumpian way.
Yeah, but that's another problem. You can't out Donald Trump because he is really, I believe, absolutely sui generis, which is in a way good news. I mean, when Donald Trump leaves, if ever, then the Republican Party, the MAGA movement, is in crisis. It essentially is returned to traditional politics.
So you don't think MAGA lives on past Trump?
I do not.
So if you're J.D. Vance, then how are you preparing your 2028 run, knowing that you will have to run on MAGA, presumably?
Well, I am sure he's thinking of this in fairly traditional terms, and not thinking of the fact that Donald Trump will cut his head off before then.
Who do you see as a leader of the post-Trump Republican Party, if there's one?
I don't. I mean, that's going to be an impossible position to replace Donald Trump. No one is like Donald Trump. No one, any of us know, is like Donald Trump. There is something from any kind of normal human standpoint went wrong there. And from on literally on every level, on his need for attention, the absolute absence of any kind of private life, the refusal to learn anything. I mean, I've always felt that one of the interesting things about his life is the resistance he's had to information, to being told anything. The Zelensky thing that happened last week. I'm watching this and I thought, I know what's coming here, because Zelensky is trying to speak up, trying to explain. You can't do it with Donald Trump. You cannot do it. If you try, he responds in an almost animal-like fashion.
He sometimes talks about a third term. Do you think he's serious?
Well, I think it's probably, first thing, Donald Trump is never serious about anything beyond now. This is truly a person who lives in the moment. I'm sure he believes that he's going to put 25% or 50% tariffs on whatever today, and then that he doesn't 24 hours later is just because it's 24 hours later.
That's reassuring.
Yeah, I mean, it is extraordinary. So the fact that what is going to happen in 2028 is of literally no concern to him. I mean, when we get to 2028, then he'll be. Then the question will be, and it's not the question. The question really isn't how do I stay the president? It's how do I keep all of the possible attention that I need on me.
I think this Canada thing is a perfect case study of Trumpism, because I can't figure out if we're going to go to war or what.
We're not going to do anything. We're going to generate headlines.
Yeah. What must be maddening for the Canadians is that they have to live the other side.
No, and I mean, then there's another thing which I haven't, which I think people have to think through is, I mean, we govern through policy, through specific agenda, through a legislative agenda, through process. But Trump is governing through headlines. And it doesn't really matter. The policies themselves don't matter. The agenda doesn't matter. The accomplishments, if any, ever don't really matter. What matters are the headlines. And actually, they have an effect. But we've just never seen anyone govern like this, so we're not quite sure what the effect is.
What's his media diet right now? Do you know? I know it used to be the New York Post, and then the Times, and then of course Fox News. Do you know
well,
it
it's mostly the the television. I mean, he doesn't read anything. But here's a thing that he does. So he gets up and he's watching. I mean, he's seeing the television constantly and flipping constantly. I mean, this is like. The machine he's connected to. This is what gives him life. I mean, there's no reality if he's not seeing this on television, and he is seeing it. But then his first calls in the morning are with aides, and he asks them then to recapitulate what he's already seen.
Also reassuring. Whom does he watch other than Fox and Friends? I don't know if he goes through the full 3 hours, or does he also go to Morning Joe or whoever's doing the CNN morning lineup now?
Yeah. I mean, he's flipping constantly. I mean, he doesn't want to see anything that's not about himself. So it's really, that's what he's, and all of this is saved, and he can go back to all of this, which he does.
I think Maggie Haberman of the Times reported that he learned from Roy Cohn to watch TV silently to see how people sort of comported themselves. It didn't matter what they said, it's how they said it. It's sort of fascinating to me.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I've never seen him watching it silently. He's watching it just. Yeah, it's not only is it not silent, but there's always this cacophony, this background thing. When you grew up in a certain kind of middle class homes, you weren't supposed to watch television during dinner. Well, Trump watches television during dinner.
Do you? By the way, where's Melania?
Melania? Where's Melania?
Yeah, is she here? Is she in Mar-a-Lago? Is she in New York? I'm just curious because she is the first lady.
During the campaign, they started to experiment with saying, well, maybe she'll be a kind of a part-time first lady. They were just looking for some way to make sense of the fact that she is never there. During the first administration, she was not in the White House. She was not really around in Mar-a-Lago, and she's not really around in the White House now. And so they thought we had to explain this. But in fact, it doesn't seem like they have to explain this. Why doesn't, it's confounding to me. Why isn't this a central story? And I can't answer that, but maybe because it is just so obvious. Everyone knows why would you say what's in front of your face? This is this is a marriage on profoundly different terms than certainly any other White House marriage, any other political marriage, and it may be on any other marriage of anyone who does not have any other couple that does not have vast real estate holdings in which they can keep their distance.
So does she live at Trump Tower, or I'm just curious.
Yes. No, I think yeah, she's in Trump Tower now, and the sort of the excuse, or at least within the campaign, it was like, well, she has to be, Barron is going to NYU, so of course she has to be there. Just what every college student wants to hear.
What about Jared and Ivanka? I haven't, seen much of them.
I've always thought that the one exception to the rule that 100% of the people around Trump are destroyed. The one exception is Jared Kushner, and I used to see that, and I used to really admire the way he maneuvered around his father-in-law. In fact, I have sons-in-law, and they kind of maneuver that way around me. But that turned out to be a bureaucratic strategy that he kept. Everybody else is trying to rush into and get Trump's attention, and Jared was always at arm's length doing his thing, and ultimately, I think, was the survivor in the White House. And then it turned out to have profited mightily from it, billions of dollars from the Saudis. But if I were someone going into the White House now, it would occur to me, or it should occur to all of these people, to say, wait a minute, where's Jared? What does he know that we don't know?
Is he working behind the scenes on Middle East policy, or is that sort of?
I think he's working behind the scenes on the issues that are meaningful to him. I think the Mexican president, for instance, who seems to be managing things adeptly under the circumstances, is I think she is open channel to Jared.
His business dealings are not only complicated, but seem relatively unexplored, at least to me. He's not a public figure. He doesn't have to, I think, disclose very many of them. So, but they seem to be vast and spread out across the world.
Totally. I mean, we've never seen anything like this. He came out of, I mean, he was responsible for the Middle East portfolio when he was in the White House, and came out of that being paid billions of dollars by billions of dollars came from the part of the world that he had direct responsibility for.
It's an incredible coincidence.
Yeah, no. So I think we would say, nice work if you can get it.
There's this talk that Trump wants to win the Nobel Peace Prize. I'm guessing largely because Obama won it, and that's very important to him to one up or at least equal Obama, but also just because it's a way to stay in the headlines. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, I mean, he would like every award, accolade.
Yep.
I mean, this is a man. This is, again, it's just attention. What are the forms of attention? Awards, yeah, bring them on. Oscars, he'll take an Oscar. Whatever.
You have this. You have him sort of thinking throughout the book. The legal strategy is the media strategy. The media strategy is the legal strategy. But that's true for all parts of his life. Everything is there's only the media strategy, right?
Only the media strategy. Literally, singularly, the media strategy. And he says it. This is what he says. How's it playing? This is the echo. You must ask this question 20 times during the day. How's it playing?
And I came up in the New York Daily News, and of course he would, he's a creature of the tabloids, the Post and the Daily News, and to much lesser extent the Times. But it seems like there's nothing but the media. There's nothing behind the.
Nothing behind it. Or he sees this in a different way. We would say that because we're creatures of politics, but from his point of view, there's nothing behind it because it's everything. It's not just the surface. It is everything. It's what people think. It's what people feel. It's how people react. It is the reality that we live in. The reality that we live in is not what happens on the Hill. It's what happens on. It's what we see on television. And let me just go back to I think a thing that is absolutely fundamental. You can't begin to have a discussion about Donald Trump without returning to this. He was the star of a top-rated reality television show for 14 years. Not a year, not 1 year, not 2 years, not 3 years, 14 years. He learned absolutely and successfully learned what it takes to keep the attention of the public. And if you're on reality television, you know that the rule is simple. Conflict, 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 conflict. That's all it is, and it has to be there. And if it isn't there, your ratings are going to die. And that's what we see every day in Trumpworld. What is the method? And what does he get up in the morning saying? He gets up saying, "What is the conflict? I need the conflict."
And I think, to me at least, the reason that he's insisting that the Associated Press call the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America is to show that he can bend the media, the most important sort of host of institutions, to his will.
Yes, but even less so. He doesn't really care if it bends to his will. What he cares about is the headline. That's generated a headline. That's a hook. I'm going to go after the Associated Press. I need a kind of adversary, an enemy for conflict. And so they'll do, anybody will do. That's it, and that's going to generate a headline.
It's sort of bracing to think we're talking about the president of the United States, and his priority is, which becomes the national priority, is headlines. To say like the obvious, I guess, but
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's, but it's better to understand that than to say his priority is immigration or Ukraine or any of these things that one might think it is. That's what Democrats think it is. Instead of saying, no, it is only about attention. It is only about this narrative. I mean, I think that in his own mind, he must have this thing, this idea of how he wants it to play. How is it playing?
oh, we're getting a signal. But I just wanted. I just wanted to make one observation, which is, to me at least, it seems like the only Democrat who can generate headlines as well as he can is AOC. I don't know, obviously very different generationally, culturally, but other than her, I don't see anyone on that side who's able to do that.
I have no, I mean, I've been doing this now for almost 10 years. Donald Trump has been what I mean, it's a horrifying realization. 10 years with Donald Trump. So to the exclusion of almost everything else. So it's like Democrats.
We should do some questions.
Hi, I have always loved Politics and Prose since the day it opened, and they do a lot of author talks. And since Donald's written books, do you think he would ever agree to come to Politics and Prose and speak?
If you packed the audience with Trumpers, he certainly would. At one point in my book, I tell, during the trial, he's in New York, and Columbia University was going crazy, and there were all kinds of Republicans that were going up there to make a point, and somebody on his staff suggested that he should take off from the trial, or take his on the Wednesdays when the court was dark, go up to Columbia and make that point, claim that issue for his own. And his response to that was no students, because he needs a friendly audience.
Do you think it would be friendly for him in an independent bookstore that really supports everybody?
Yeah, it doesn't sound like it's Trump territory. Books.
Thank you.
Bookstore doesn't sound like.
Out of all the books you wrote, what was your favorite book?
Then I would have. There's like, who's my favorite child, and I have a lot of children, so.
Earlier, when you were talking about the uniqueness of Trump, you mentioned what he means to the folks who really believe in him, what he means to as a reflection of us as society, and you also mentioned what he means to the change in politics. What does he mean to the change in politics now and going forward?
Well, I think that idea, that's idea that we've always had, that of a person outside politics, and and it's variously been from both left and right a kind of grail. We need someone outside of politics. We need an outsider. We need someone who can see things in a different way. Well, Donald Trump is that person, and it will be an interesting thing to see if this continues, if that remains a kind of model. We want someone from outside politics. And I mean, my feeling, as I said before, is I think that goes away. I think that that it's very hard to come from outside of politics. It's very hard to be that kind of, reality show guy. But I think that probably is the central difference that has happened in the Trump era, is that we do have this 100% media figure.
Last week, Politics and Prose at another store had a you can hear? Okay. A teach-in, and Congressman Jamie Raskin spoke very eloquently, as usual. And the takeaway from that was, if you want, we're down to the courts and protest, similar to what happened with civil rights for years, that there have to be continual protests because that's what brings down despots. But my question is, what gets under his skin? How is it that it's so Teflon-like? It's hard to combat effectively what he's doing.
Yeah.
And how to get under his skin.
I mean, everything gets under his skin. It turns out that Donald Trump is, in fact, very thin-skinned. But at the same time, and I think it has to do with this incredibly short attention span, that he just goes, it gets under the skin. The rage he goes crazy, and then it passes. And within Trumpworld, they kind of have a thing. They say, "How's the weather?" And someone else will say, very stormy. But an hour later, oh, sun's up.
How do you explain his fascination with Putin and just wanting to generate headlines? Is that what that is about?
I think it's one of the big mysteries of our time. In 2018, when he went to meet with Putin in Helsinki, I had gone to Europe with Steve Bannon, and we were there watching that news conference, and I remember Steve just being, he says, "What does Putin have on him?" Because I mean, with Steve observed, look at him, he looks like a whipped dog. What does Putin have on him? So I don't. It's an elemental question.
Earlier, you were talking about the analysis that the Democrats might have, right? I think the challenge is the Democrats and the Republicans, it's the money that keeps them. They can't they can't do too much because they can't raise money next time it's time to run. But recognizing what the real problem is, how did this guy that you've been describing convince half of the white people to vote for him? And if the Democrats don't start there, right? And I blame the media as the teachers for the adults. As adults, we always say the teachers are doing a rotten job in school, right? But the press is doing a rotten job with the adults. More adults think that guy that you described is the one for America.
He improved. He did better in 24 than he did in 20 and 16. He did better in D.C., did better in New York, did better in San Francisco. I mean, this time.
Well, yeah, part of the answer is you run a media strategy in which you dominate, and you give no one else a chance. No one really exists. And if you think back across this the campaign, what you think about is Donald Trump. You think only about Joe Biden dropping out, and you think about Kamala Harris having a month. But Donald Trump had 2 years in which he dominated everything. I mean, no Republican in those set of primaries they had, no one had a voice. No one really existed. It was all the time just Donald Trump, and that turns out to be, enormously powerful. Plus, he's. I think we should. You have to come to terms with this. He's not boring. I think part of the problem with politics, part of the problem with politicians, is that language died with them. You hear politicians talk and you turn it off because they say nothing. Well, Donald Trump doesn't say nothing. He every time he steps up there, he's saying something that's going to get headlines because nobody else says anything. Everybody else is in dramatic terms conflict averse. Donald Trump is just inviting conflict.
Did we have one last question on this side? We'll just go straight.
I've been amazed how much manic energy he does have. I mean, going to places every single day on his plane, and you were commenting that he goes through manic as well as depressive states. We don't see on TV the depressive states. I mean, does he have medications that even him out a bit? Or exactly how does he get all that energy?
Well, the depressive there's a thing that when you think about all of that energy, and he does, and certainly when I've been with him, you're kind of, you're kind of rear back. You think, oh my God, he's going to eat me. But another part of this is that he began every day of the campaign when he was in Mar-a-Lago, and that was the overwhelming number of days of the campaign began in Mar-a-Lago, started with 18 holes of golf. Now this is, all these other politicians, these Republicans are out there, they're living in Iowa, they're working as hard as they've ever worked. Running for president is probably the hardest job that you can do, the hardest job on your time, on your body, not Donald Trump, 18 holes of golf.
I remember in 2019, he had just done that thing where he walked across the DMZ in Korea and shook hands with Kim Jong-un, and then he flew to CPAC, conservative conference in Oxon Hill, Maryland. He spoke for 2.5 hours, nonstop. Made no sense whatsoever. There were, imitations of New York real estate moguls. None of the MAGA grassroots could have possibly known who these people were, but they were riveted for the entire time. It was really a bravura performance.
Always, the man just can go on forever. He would not leave the stage if not forced to by AIDS and the need of a bathroom break.
Thank you so much for coming out, everyone, and a round of applause for our author and moderator tonight.
Thanks so much.